So I've been playing a lot of Persona 5 in the last few months, and you know what I've noticed? Everything.
Persona 5 is a bit of a special case. Sure, fundamentally, it's a very conventional JRPG. Even so, I can't really remember the last time a JRPG had a mainstream response like that since, God, I don't know, Final Fantasy VII maybe? The weird thing is that I can't even say it's because it has an amazing plot and the characters are unbelievably real in person. If you were to ask me, I think it's mostly due to conversation this game sparked by its art direction more than anything else. So let's explore that. Is the success of Persona 5 linked mostly or entirely on its art direction? And more so, is that over-reliance on that front strips this game of any substance?
I guess the first and most appropriate thing to talk about would also be Persona 5's most defining trait.
If you had to describe Persona 5 in just one image, it wouldn't even be an image. That color is sewn and woven into the fabrics of this game. The greatest thing about it is not only its application on a trichromatic color palette, but also how well it complements the theming and characterization of that story. That rebellious, passionate color. It's been a big point as to why it's been a huge talking point online, for damn good reasons too. Its uses, its overwhelming presence, its bold, distinct shape, its sharp attention-grabbing flair. It would be very hard for me to think of any other time in any media where a color was such an assertive character. It represents a brash nature of rebellion, the fires of revolution, the passion of determination. All of it comes together, but it would all be secondary if it didn't act out like the rest of the character it represents. It jumps you, it overwhelms you, it hides from you in plain sight. It wants to be noticed by you, the player. That alone would be enough to give Persona 5 a great amount of praise, and wear those like a badge of honor. However, that over-reliance may also be its greatest weakness. By showing it so much, it's also kind of desensitizing you to the themes and fades away into flair that is very well done, but does lend to a sense that most of it is more visually stimulating than thematic. Again, all of this is complementing the story, not really representing it. It's, to be bold, flashy and flat. Even so, in comparison, other characters of the main cast also get a specific color attached to them. Most of them, though, feel like an excuse to widen its palette rather than to attach meaning or deepen its character relations. It's very hard to find convincing evidence as to why a character is rooted within the core element of that color. And instead, it feels more like some of them should be more of a mix rather than being simplistic, all to fit into that trichromatic color scheme.
This leads right into my next point, which is about the social links, confidants.
While relatively simple on the surface, the Terra and social link connections are fairly strong and depict a more nuanced approach to characterization than color theory did. Substance is very much present here, and connections to the root of the system can be established without sacrificing character development.
But to suggest that the characters will build around that system is flat out wrong. The only reason we have those connections to make is because the previous game had that specific mechanic. So, sure, there are some parallels here, but remember, they're mostly surface level.
Looking back, most of them are a way to make connections rather to amplify depths of understanding, especially when you do not have knowledge of those beliefs. To me, at least, it seems like a pretty simple way to look at your characters rather than to build layers. None of it's specifically bad, just interesting. Besides, if it's a way to quickly express a whole character background, it's done pretty efficiently, just not tactfully. But why am I spending all this time talking about such a small detail? Well, this is how you leveled up with social links in Persona 3. And this is how you'll level up in Persona 5. Alright. I can't really speak about the meaning of those in Persona 3 as I've not played that game. However, the differences in between both is shocking. If you were to ask me, Why is this a specific edition in Persona 5? I'd just tell you that this was here to be more visually interesting rather than engaging with character deaths. Now, while I do think that this game is rich in theming, my biggest gripe definitely comes from the symbolisms like the 7 deadly sins trope. First of which, there are only 8 palaces in this game, and 2 of them you can kind of put on the same category. Second of all, while during the early portions of the game it's fairly played down, after about halfway into the game, this theme is ham-fisted into you, and any kind of subtlety is instantly crushed by expository dialogue. This is crushing, because if instead of building a lot of interesting contrasts and interactions between characters, we're stuck with symbolism so obvious, it might as well be plastered on the box and sold on the magazine stand next to a goddamn church. All of this, and to be frank, a lot more, makes it seem like the symbolism was projected after having the baseline for the game. So here are the big questions. Does this game have subtext? Yes. Does this game have derived meaning from this subtext? Yes. Is this game subtle? No!
It'd be foolish of me to say otherwise. Here's the thing though. What carries this game above all is its confidence in itself.
There isn't a single part of this game that I think doesn't want you to be impressed by. It thrives within the idea to be seen. It revolts against the conventional thoughts of design elements. It mocks the idea of subtlety. It wants you to truly see the world as the Phantom Thieves do. That right there is how Persona 5 succeeds with its art direction.
I didn't really know how to incorporate the following, but here goes nothing, I guess. The other biggest distinction about this game would be its OST.
I'm no composer, nor am I a music producer, but hot damn! Shoji Meguro, my man, did such a phenomenal work bringing everything into such a cohesive manner. I have a lot of issue with composers that think that the music should be strictly atmospheric. And in that regard, Shoji Meguro said, fuck you those guys. Many composers in the past have stated and discussed the philosophy that music should not be noticed by general audiences. I think the same. Most games suffer because of it. To me, a lot of OST may have phenomenal pieces, but come separate from the actual game and are made to be the only distinct pieces of that work. The main theme for Halo is fucking incredible. It's so serene, so smooth, so calm at the beginning with those choirs, and it just slowly but very carefully ramps up. And that intensity comes crashing down like a fucking sledgehammer. It's insane. And that's about the only piece that I could ever care about from that game. Persona 5 is different. Every piece connects to one another, and they, for the majority, also sound utterly fantastic. It can be melancholic, joyful, empowering, determined, ominous, stressful, relaxing, sweet, smooth, layered, hopeful, and explosive. Of course, I will also be a huge ass if I didn't mention Lin and Izumi. She's almost single-handedly why the soundtrack is as loved as it is right now. Her intonation, range, and general demeanor and voice links all of these pieces together. The soundtrack just does a great job at linking all those elements, so much so that it becomes almost its own genre. It's impossible to neither detach those pieces from Persona 5, nor mistake them from anything else. That strange mix of J-pop, jazz, and orchestral, it all works to make something that's truly a pleasure to hear time and time again. Sure, lyrics seem on the nose sometimes, but it all carries itself with assertive confidence. And that's what makes it so much better in my eyes. A lot of time and effort went into building layers for themes, but it never strays away from its initial goal of being an absolute banger.
This part may seem insignificant to most, but it is one of the most important sources of feedback in a game. We're talking about visual effects and audio design. Let's start with the obvious one, visual effects.
These effects are everywhere, and are most likely the most dumbed down elements of the game, and I don't blame Atlus at all for that decision. Making everything diegetic or linked to the major themes is near impossible due to the sheer amount of work it requires. Perhaps even more time could be spent on these than the general confident look. But to me, all of these can be comprised under one single word: rebellion. The shapes, they're bold and angular. Red is overlaid almost everywhere, whether it's in menus and combat. Movement is constant and unpredictable. Icons, bounces, and excitement. Every step you take leaves a trail of paint, leaving your literal mark on the world. It would take me 5 to 10 minutes to talk about most of them, and I'd still be missing a good chunk. But all comes together to push that singular idea, without having much behind it. Then again, the success of it mostly comes from the simplicity of the idea. But nonetheless, look at how many different visual components are on screen right now. Sure, it can be overwhelming, but remember, it's all to build a frame of understanding from the character's viewpoint. And of course, you have the big stuff like the all-out attacks, which truly needs no addition to what everybody already said about them. They're fucking awesome. Now, for the less appreciated part, the audio design. I'm 50-50 on them. I think a good chunk of them are fairly standard, while the other half is punchy, crunchy, and crafty. Hey, let's talk about the good stuff. All-out attacks. Persona's Awakening and Summon. That slap every time you open your menu. The clicks and chat messages when you're on your phone. Every time you ambush an enemy and the sound of the mask being ripped off as it goes further into the palace. That slash during hold-up. Elemental attacks. That high-pitched sound when showtimes become available.
We'll crush them. Ready when you are.
The audio design isn't incredibly layered in meaning, but it is super important to get it right. Using other elements may undercut a lot of the power or the smoothness of an animation. And I think the last few examples are the perfect choices they could have possibly made. Flashy, but not grungy. Think of playing something like Doom Eternal, but the gun sounds like you're shooting a goddamn Nerf gun. Actually, let's switch the sound of the shotgun from each game and listen to them individually. Both of them completely different games, but if the sound doesn't match the visual and enhance them, what's the point? Yeah, sure, this one may have more power, but does it fit more under that context? I don't think so. Very few things could be derived from these sounds, but they do lend a huge sense of reality to their own world. These two right there are not simply just secondary components to make a better experience, they're essential to truly believe in this world and are by far some of the most important elements of Persona 5.
Listen, I know this video has been all over the place for the most part. Every time I want to talk about Persona 5, I end up going for 5-minute long rants about God knows what, about almost everything I liked about it. It's impossible really for me to talk about all of them, but Persona 5 is the only game in years that enabled me to make videos, actual videos, not a let's play, not a shitpost. And I think that's what I liked about it the most. the discussion I had with people.
I genuinely believe the reason why people talk about a lot more of UI and art direction online has been directly linked to Persona 5 in some fashion. Its success was undeniable. It works, and while most elements here do sometimes have deeper layers and meaning, I think Persona 5 mostly carries itself because of this attitude, this air of confidence. Without it, the turn-based combats and the real-life sim stuff would be utterly boring. The music wouldn't be as distinct as it is. It's snappy, excessive, and most importantly, big. Checkmate!
So yes, Persona 5 style is ever present. Would you have it any other way?